Greetings, seekers of reality. Today, we're asking a question that has baffled the greatest minds in human history for centuries, from Plato and Descartes to Einstein and Hawking. Who are you, really? Most of us, without a second thought, would answer, I am my body. We look in the mirror and see a stable image that we call ourselves. But here lies the first purely physical paradox. Biologists know that the cells of your body are in a state of constant chaos and renewal. The lining of your gut completely replaces itself every 5 days, your skin renews once a month, and your bones remodel themselves every few years. In essence, every 7 to 10 years, there isn't a single atom left in your physical body that composed it a decade ago. If you are your body, then you are a river that is constantly flowing but never stays the same. Yet yourself, your personality, your deepest memories, and that elusive sense of being remains motionless. So, what exactly connects this new person, made of fresh atoms, to the small child you were 20 years ago? Today, we will dive into the deep waters of neurobiology and quantum physics to find arguments that our consciousness is not just a byproduct of brain activity. We will look for the soul where it was least expected, in the very structure of reality. In modern science, there is a fundamental dead end called the hard problem of consciousness. This term was introduced by philosopher David Chalmers, and it remains an insurmountable wall for materialists. The core of the problem is simple. We already understand fairly well how the brain processes external signals, how neurons transmit electrical impulses, and how chemistry governs our reactions. But science hasn't the slightest clue how this gray matter and these electrical discharges give birth to a subjective, internal experience. Why does the color red feel red to us, evoking a specific sensation, rather than just being recorded as a wave of a certain length? Why do we feel a piercing melancholy from the sound of a violin? Neurobiology can show on an MRI which area of the brain lights up when you are in love, but it cannot explain the feeling of love itself. This is a colossal gap between objective matter and subjective spirit. If consciousness is just the hardware of the brain at work, why aren't we just complex biological robots that perform functions but feel nothing inside? There is an alternative, fascinating hypothesis supported by many giants of science, including Nobel laureate Sir John Ecclesiastes. It states, the brain is not the producer of consciousness, but its high-tech receiver. Imagine an ordinary television. If you hit it with a hammer or damage the microchips, the broadcast on the screen will be distorted or vanish entirely. Does this mean that the news anchor you saw was inside the TV and died along with it? Of course not. It only means that the physical device is no longer capable of receiving and decoding the external signal. Many researchers believe that our self is an external operator using the brain as a biological interface to interact with this dense three-dimensional world. But where is the physical evidence? Where is that antenna cable connecting us to something greater? This is where Sir Roger Penrose enters the stage, one of the greatest mathematicians and physicists of our time, who worked alongside Stephen Hawking. Together with renowned anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, he developed a theory called orchestroir, or orchestrated objective reduction. They turned their attention to structures inside the neurons of our brain called microtubules. For a long time, biologists considered them to be a sort of cellular skeleton or rebar that simply held the cell's shape. But Penrose saw something else. Due to their size and structure, microtubules are perfectly suited for quantum processes to occur within them. Quantum physics tells us that particles can be entangled, meaning they are connected instantaneously regardless of distance. If consciousness operates at the level of quantum computing inside these microtubules, then it is not tied to a specific place in space or time. This means that consciousness is not the result of random chemical reactions, but a fundamental property of the universe itself, existing at the deepest, microscopic level of reality. From this perspective, when a person's heart stops and blood ceases to flow to the brain cells, the quantum information accumulated in the microtubules is not destroyed. It cannot burn or rot. It simply dissipates into space, returning to that very quantum ocean from which it came. This gives us a scientific basis for understanding what we call the soul, an eternal informational structure that temporarily occupies a biological spacesuit. We cannot ignore the thousands of documented cases of near-death experiences, NDEs, being studied by scientists worldwide. One of the most famous researchers in this field, Dutch cardiologist Pim van Lommel, published shocking data in the journal The Lancet. He studied patients who survived clinical death, where all instruments recorded a total flatline on the EEG. This means the cerebral cortex is completely shut down, and no activity, and therefore no hallucinations, can occur. Nevertheless, hundreds of patients described in detail everything that happened in the operating room and even beyond it at the moment their brains were dead. They saw instruments, heard doctors' conversations, and even noticed details of people's clothing in neighboring hallways. From the perspective of classical biology, this is impossible. But if we accept the brain as receiver model, everything falls into place. When the TV breaks, the signal still exists in the airwaves. If the brain isn't working, who is the observer recording what's happening? This is a direct indication that our true self is capable of functioning autonomously, without the support of biological neurons. Moreover, quantum mechanics throws us another argument, the observer effect. We know that at the subatomic level, matter behaves like a wave of probability until a conscious observer looks at it. It is the act of awareness that causes reality to freeze into a concrete form. This is a fundamental law of the universe. Without an observer, matter remains only a cloud of possibilities. If matter depends on consciousness, how can consciousness be a product of that very matter? This is a logical impasse that is resolved in only one way: consciousness is primary, and the body is merely its temporary projection in the physical world. We are used to spending vast resources caring for our spacesuit, the body. We feed it, train it, treat it, and decorate it. But we often forget about the pilot sitting inside. Physics teaches us that energy never disappears without a trace, it only changes form and state. If our consciousness has an informational, quantum nature, it directly obeys the law of conservation of energy. You are not a biological machine that accidentally learned to think during evolution. You are the universe itself, which has gained individual consciousness to live a unique experience, to see the world through your eyes, and to feel it with your heart. Think about it, if your body were the only reality, then any injury or organ replacement would make you a lesser person. But we know that a person who has lost a limb or received a donor heart remains the exact same personality. Their self is whole. This is because your essence is not the sum of your parts. It is an invisible pattern, a complex quantum symphony that plays through your brain but does not belong to it. In conclusion of our journey today, I want you to look at yourself differently. You are not just a collection of bones and muscles destined for aging. You are an eternal stream of information, temporarily embodied in this amazing biological form. Death, in this paradigm, is not the end of the film, but merely a change of scenery or a transition to a new level of the game, where consciousness is freed from the limitations of dense matter. Write in the comments, have there been moments in your life that cannot be explained by logic? Have you ever felt the presence of yourself outside the physical boundaries of your body? Your opinion and your experience are extremely important to our community of explorers. If this video made you look at the world from a different angle, be sure to give it a like and share it with friends. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our new investigations into the deepest mysteries of the universe. Remember, you are much more than what you see in the mirror. Take care of your inner pilot. See you in the next episode.